Hello friends. Antarctica is the only continent which isn't a country, doesn't have a government, nor any indigenous tribals living there for ages. One of the most obvious reasons is that it is the coldest continent in the world. The temperature can go as low as -89 degrees Celsius. Additionally, it is also the windiest place on Earth, with snowstorms at a speed of 300 kilometers per hour. It can blind you. Antarctica is also the world's driest continent, to the extent that you might be surprised to know that it is considered a desert. There's only around 51 millimeters of rain here. And even when it rains, it turns into snow before reaching the ground. So in a way, Antarctica is the only place on Earth with little to no influence of humans. Humans have little to no influence. However, this does not mean that countries from all over the world have not attempted to take over Antarctica. Take a look at this map. France claims this part of Antarctica, Norway claims this part, and Australia claims the entire right side. Countries such as the United Kingdom, Chile, Argentina, and New Zealand all claim parts of Antarctica. So, is Antarctica truly divided between these nations? Let's learn about Antarctica's fascinating geopolitics and history in today's video. Antarctica. A composite portrait of a continent that has challenged man since he first discovered he could sail beyond the limits of his horizon. The Antarctic continent is surrounded by ice-covered seas. The south, the world's bottom, is much colder than the top of the world. Missions to investigate the strange wonders of the Antarctic. For the Song of Antarctica's secrets is only one piece of a larger puzzle that challenges man in every corner of the universe. Let's start at the beginning of our story. Around 350 BC, Aristotle, a Greek philosopher, was among the first to assert that the Earth was spherical. The Greeks were aware of the Arctic regions in the north at the time. The Arctos was its name. The word Arctos comes from the bear. One of the constellations visible in the sky is that of the Great Bear. They named the Arctic region Arctos in honor of that constellation. They knew that because the Earth is spherical, the north and south would be mirror images with similar features. As a result, the unknown southern region was given the name Antarctos. It meant opposite to the bear. Arctos, polar opposite. The name Antarctica was derived from this. Humans first set foot on Antarctica in the 1890s, but it had been visible on maps for hundreds of years before that. When several explorers went on expeditions around the world, they knew that going to the south of the world would lead them to some land. But they had no idea what was on the land, or the size of it. This is why, when the French explorers drew the world map in 1530, they included Antarctica. Take a look at this map. The northern hemisphere is shown on the left. And on the right, the southern hemisphere. The largest land mass in the southern hemisphere was named. It literally translated to unknown southern land. In 1773, British naval officer James Cook became the first person to travel south of the Antarctic Circle. When he turned his ship around, he was about 130 kilometers away from Antarctica. He hadn't been to Antarctica, but he had seen icebergs with rock deposits on them. When he saw those rocks, he was taken aback. He came to the conclusion that Terra Australis does exist. But going much closer to Antarctica was so dangerous, that he had famously said, "I can be bold to say no man will ever venture farther than me I have done, and that the lands which lie to the south will never be explored because the place was so perilous." Strong winds were blowing, and the ship was in danger of colliding with icebergs at any moment. However, his words were proven to be incorrect 50 years later. It is debatable who was the first person to set foot on Antarctica. Because multiple people claim to be the first person. Because his ship was lost and he arrived in Antarctica, British-American Captain John Davis believed he was the first person to do so. In 1895, the first undisputed landing occurred. When the Norwegian ship Antarctic arrived at its shores, 6 to 7 members of the ship's crew boarded a small boat and proceeded to land. Karsten Borchgrevink, a Norwegian on the boat, claims to have landed before the boat and to have been the first person to set foot on Antarctica. However, Alexander, a man from New Zealand, claims to have been on this boat and was the first to step out to keep the boat stable. These two people from the same boat got into a fight over who was the first to get off the boat and the first to set foot on Antarctica. As you can see on the screen, there is also a funny drawing of it. Alexander is sneaking out of the boat in order to be the first person to set foot on Antarctica. And the rest of the people in the boat are surprised because they, too, wanted to be the first. Following this, the first 20 years of the 20th century are known as the heroic years of Antarctica. Because many expeditions were conducted during this time, new scientific discoveries were made, and we learned a lot about Antarctica. It was the first time we discovered that plants grow on this continent. Mosses have been discovered growing in Antarctica. The colonial period of Antarctica followed this heroic era, when several countries attempted to claim Antarctica. 7 countries claimed sovereignty over this continent between 1908 and 1942. Argentina, Australia, Chile, France, New Zealand, Norway, and the United Kingdom are among the countries represented. Aside from them, countries such as the United States, the Soviet Union, Japan, Sweden, Belgium, and Germany were conducting new expeditions on Antarctica without claiming any territory. During Hitler's reign, a German Antarctic expedition was carried out in 1939, in which they flew in an aeroplane to photograph some areas of the Antarctic. They even dropped metal Nazi swastikas, claiming that the areas where they were dropped were under Nazi Germany's control. Surprisingly, the United States was not very active during this time period. America's Secretary of State announced their official position on Antarctic territorial claims in 1924. He stated that just because a country discovers new land in Antarctica does not mean that the new areas automatically become its property. Only when there are actual settlements in the area will the land become national property, when a country's citizens live there permanently. But this did not occur. After the end of World War II, these countries started fighting each other over their claims on Antarctica's land. By fighting I do not mean literal warfare. What I mean is that they were expressing their claims more strongly. These countries set up permanent research centers in Antarctica to show that they have a permanent station in the area. And since researchers were living there permanently, they claimed the land theirs. If you look at the map of Antarctica, there are several islands near Antarctica. The Heard and Macquarie Islands, on which Australia established stations in 1947-48. In 1953, France set up bases on Kerguelen and Crozet Islands. The next year, in 1954, Australia reached mainland Antarctica and set up the Mawson Station. It was on Antarctica's continent. 1 year later, Argentina set up the General Belgrano Station. This was in Antarctica on the Filchner-Rinne ice shelf. There's so much ice in Antarctica. It makes it difficult to know if there is land under all that ice. In this map, you can see there are some ice shelves on the exterior of the land. And these ice shelves have different names. Setting up research stations had become a political strategy of the countries. At one point, the British, Chilean, and Argentinian bases were so close to each other that it was clearly evident that they weren't set up solely for scientific research. It was clearly evident that these stations were being set up for intelligence activities. In fact, the territorial claims of these countries on Antarctica overlap. Look at this political map of Antarctica. The blue dots are the present-day bases of the various countries. The existing research stations in Antarctica. The Antarctic land claimed by Norway, Australia, France, and New Zealand can be clearly demarcated. Their territories do not overlap with each other. But if you look at the left side of the map, you'll see the land claimed by Chile, Britain, and Argentina overlap with each other. Chile's claims include the British and Argentinian claims as well. In 1950, the Soviet Union government issued a memorandum to the rest of the world, saying that if a country claimed Antarctica's territory without the Soviet Union's permission, or if it made decisions regarding Antarctica with the Soviets' participation, the Soviets would not recognize any such claims. By this time, Cold War had broken out between America and Russia, and people were afraid that the two countries start their geopolitics in Antarctica as well. These countries were already fighting each other in multiple areas of the world, but no one wanted them to be fighting on Antarctica too. But thankfully, it didn't happen. In 1958, American President Eisenhower issued notice to the rest of the governments, calling for a treaty to ensure that Antarctica would always be a free and peaceful place. In Washington on 15th of October 1959, a conference was held on it. On 1st of December 1959, the Antarctic Treaty was signed. There were three major points in this treaty. First, Antarctica would be used for peaceful purposes only. Second, everyone would be free to carry out scientific investigation. And third, the results of the scientific observations would be freely exchanged and available to all. Initially, this treaty was signed by 12 governments, including all countries which were claiming territory on Antarctica. But the most interesting thing about this treaty is that the claims of these countries weren't abolished. This treaty merely suspended those claims temporarily. So legally, even now, these countries can continue to claim those territories, and they are doing so indeed. This political map of Antarctica is still valid. Australia claims the largest share. Australia claims 42% of Antarctica. But it is also important to notice that America rejects the claims of these countries. Not only America, most of the countries around the world reject these territorial claims. Not only this, these 7 countries claiming territory in Antarctica do not recognize each other's claims. France, Australia, New Zealand, and Norway recognize each other's claims. But the UK, Chile, and Argentina do not recognize each other's claims because their territories overlap. Today, the countries that claim land in Antarctica merely have a symbolic claim. This treaty had temporarily suspended the claims. But it also means that on the expiry of the treaty, these territorial claims would become important. This is why these 7 countries have held on to their claims over Antarctica. This treaty is set to expire in 2048. Post that, whether this treaty would be renewed or not will have to be seen. Let's talk about why countries may not want to renew it later in the video. But thankfully, with the help of the treaty, in the present, there has been little to no geopolitics in Antarctica, and more scientific research. This has benefited scientists hugely. The International Council of Scientific Unions established a special committee to conduct research on the Antarctic, under which scientists from different countries are coordinating together. This is why every year, about 4,500 scientists go to Antarctica to work. And a strong collaboration between scientists from different countries has been seen. Friends, it is interesting to know about India's role in this story. Actually, in the beginning, India was completely against this Antarctic treaty, because India believed that this Antarctic treaty will be used by these 10 to 12 countries to capture Antarctica. Even though the countries agree that the land will be used for peaceful uses only. But it was possible that these countries may choose to carry out mining. If oil is found there, these countries would mine for oil and make profits out of it. India had appealed to the United Nations that the United Nations should take over the control of the entire continent. But the UN didn't do this. About 30 years later, in December 1981, India launched its first expedition to Antarctica. India did so quite secretly, so that other countries didn't know about it. It was led by renowned marine biologist Dr. Syed Zahoor Qasim. India had borrowed an icebreaker ship from Norway, called the Polar Circle, to carry out this expedition. This expedition was successful. The New Scientist magazine published the headline, "Indians quietly invade Antarctica in jest." It wasn't a real invasion. It was a research expedition. But doing so was illegal, because India wasn't a part of the Antarctic Treaty. So technically, India wasn't allowed to go there and conduct research. At that time, India was also a part of the non-aligned movement. During the Cold War between the US and the Soviet Union, most of the countries had taken sides. But India was non-aligned. We didn't support either of the two countries. In 1983, the non-aligned countries pressurized the United Nations so much that finally, the General Assembly of the United Nations had to concede and agreed to take up the topic of Antarctica in the next meeting. About 1 month before the meeting, India signed the Antarctic Treaty and applied for the consultative party status. This was quite shocking for the rest of the countries, because till that point in time, India was against the Antarctic Treaty. And then it abruptly changed its stance and signed the Antarctic Treaty. Today, there are 2 active stations of India in Antarctica, in which constant studies and research on geology are being conducted. The second expedition of India to Antarctica included scientist Sudipta Sengupta. In her research, she studied that the Skirmacher Hills on the coast of Antarctica was actually a part of the fault line, joined to the Indian subcontinent. It had broken apart from India from that point, after which India moved north and collided with Tibet and the Himalayas were formed, and India became a part of the continent of Asia. Later, in 1991, an environmental protection treaty was signed in Antarctica, also known as the Madrid Protocol, because it was signed in Madrid, the capital of Spain. In this treaty, finally, restrictions were put on drilling and mining activities in Antarctica. No country can do drilling and mining in Antarctica, so that Antarctica is protected. It was very important to do so because many countries are scavengers when it comes to oil. Under the guise of exploration of oil, a large number of places have been destroyed. In a study from 1992, the U.S. Geological Survey experts found 19 billion barrels of oil under Antarctica can be recovered. Mineral explorers in Russia claim that there are 500 billion barrels of oil and gas under Antarctica. But there are 2 reasons why till now oil mining hasn't been conducted in Antarctica. The Madrid Protocol is the first reason, the treaty that keeps us protected from such instances. And the other reason is that it will be quite expensive to do so. At least for now. But in the future, due to climate change, the threat may increase further. As this ice is melting due to climate change, it is becoming easier to access Antarctica. New technologies will be developed with time. And perhaps then it wouldn't be an expensive affair. And it becomes economically viable to extract oil and gas from there. As I told you, this treaty will expire in 2048. If these countries do not renew this treaty, this can be possible after that. Several countries have taken to fishing in the oceans near Antarctica and exploiting it. Like China. China has recently expanded fishing and tourism there. Actually, after the year 2000, China is the only country which has set up research stations in Antarctica. No other country has set up new stations. Apart from this, according to the data from 2018, there were several private yachts, carrying wealthy private individuals which went to mainland Antarctica and illegally exploited nature there. Several countries talk about the ocean around Antarctica should come under a new treaty to regulate things, so that there is no overfishing there, and to ensure that no one enters the oceans illegally, and it becomes a protected area as well. After 2003, there is a permanent physical presence of the Antarctic Treaty as well. The headquarters is in Buenos Aires, Argentina. If you look at this in the sense of geopolitics, today, Antarctica is not a country. It is a political territory, where several countries have come together to collaborate, and divided power among them equally. But Antarctica doesn't have any police force, no army, and no legal system. The loopholes of this treaty can be seen being exploited even now. For tourism, tourists can go to the British station in Antarctica, named the Port Lockroy, and can get their passports stamped there. Even in the territories of Chile and Argentina, tourists can get their passports stamped. It is another way through which these countries express their claims. What do you think, friends? What should be Antarctica's future? Should things continue as they are? Countries collaborating together, not allowed to do mining and drilling, and people can be allowed to go there for scientific research or tourism? Or should we explore Antarctica even more? Comment below to let me know. If this video was interesting to you, you will be interested in this playlist containing my videos. Like the video, subscribe the channel. Thank you very much.